spend our entire lives teaching our children that kindness is the ultimate human currency. Yet the most dangerous person you will ever encounter isn't the one shouting in your face, but the one smiling while they hand you a debt you never agreed to sign. It's a chilling reality of our modern social landscape, what sociologists are increasingly calling weaponized pro-sociality. Statistics suggest that nearly 1 in 4 people have experienced a high-conflict relationship where kindness was used as a grooming tool before the control began. We live in an era where the nice guy or the selfless martyr has become a sophisticated psychological mask, a way to bypass our natural defenses. Let's be honest for a second. Do you remember when a gift was just a gift? Think back to being 7 years old. A neighbor hands you a warm cookie, a friend shares a toy. There was no fine print, there was no aftermath, it was just light. But for many of you listening, that light has been replaced by a heavy, flickering fluorescent glow. You've developed a core paradox. The very empathy that makes you a beautiful human has become the hook used to catch you. Your survival mechanism, your ability to sense and meet the needs of others, has been turned into a cage. You feel exhausted, not because you're ungrateful, but because you are drowning in a kindness that feels more like a slow-motion heist of your soul. It's not a flaw in your character.
It's a sophisticated exploitation of your depth.
To understand why this feels so paralyzing, we have to look at the machinery under the hood. There are 3 specific principles at play here that turn a good deed into a golden handcuff. First, we have the weaponized reciprocity norm. This is a fundamental social rule. When someone does something for us, we feel an evolutionary itch to repay them. A manipulator doesn't give, they invest. They trigger that itch until it becomes a rash, leaving you feeling like you owe them your loyalty, your time, or your silence, simply because they bought you dinner or checked in when you were down.
Then there is pathological altruism. This is the philosophical shadow where help is actually a form of ego inflation. The manipulator isn't serving you, they are serving the image of themselves as a savior. If you try to assert a boundary, they don't see a person, they see a broken project that is suddenly being ungrateful. Finally, we see the onset of fawn response neural rewiring. When you are consistently manipulated by kindness, your nervous system stops looking for danger in mean people and starts scanning for the hook in nice people. Your amygdala, that tiny alarm bell in your brain, is stuck on a low humming radar in your chest that refuses to power down. It's an exhausting state of hyper-vigilant gratitude. Imagine, if you will, a glass-walled garden. From the outside, it's stunning. There are roses, soft benches, and the person who built it for you is standing at the gate, offering you a key with a humble bow. You walk in, feeling lucky. But as the sun sets, you realize the walls are 20 feet high and made of reinforced glass. You try to leave, but the gatekeeper looks hurt, devastated even. "After all the flowers I planted for you?" they ask. Suddenly, the beauty of the garden doesn't matter. You realize you aren't a guest. You're a collection piece. The air is sweet, yes, but it's getting harder and harder to breathe because the person who loves you has replaced the oxygen with their own expectations. So, how do you know if you're standing in a garden or a cell? The difference lies in the hidden ledger. In a healthy relationship, kindness is a sunk cost. It's given and forgotten. In a weaponized relationship, kindness is an accounts receivable. Watch for the but pivot. It sounds like this. "I know you're tired, but after I spend all afternoon helping you move, I thought you'd at least have the decency to listen to me for an hour." Notice how the gift of help was actually a down payment on your future compliance. Another red flag is the publicity of the sacrifice. If their kindness always seems to have an audience, or if they ensure you never forget exactly how much they suffered to help you, they aren't building a bridge, they're building a pedestal.
They want you to look up at them so you never notice they're standing on your shadow. The most painful part? The self-gaslight. You start telling yourself, I'm the problem. They're so nice and I'm just ungrateful. That guilt isn't a sign of your failure. It's the intended output of their generosity. To break the cycle, you have to perform a radical act of moral auditing. You must realize that a gift with a price tag isn't a gift. It's a contract you never signed, and you cannot be held liable for a contract you didn't agree to. The exit strategy isn't about being mean, it's about sovereignty. Acknowledge the act, but ignore the debt. Say, thank you for the dinner, it was lovely. Stop there. Do not offer your soul in exchange for the appetizer. Define the terms. If they say, after all I've done for you, your internal response must be, you chose to do those things. I am grateful for the choice, but I am not owned by it. Embrace the villain arc. To a manipulator, a boundary looks like an attack. You have to be okay with being the ungrateful one in their story, so you can be the free one in yours. The moment you stop trying to pay back an unpayable debt, the walls of the glass garden shatter. You'll find that the air outside might be a little colder, but it's finally, beautifully yours to breathe.
The price of living in a state of perpetual debt is a kind of invisible grief that most people never name. It's a quiet, corrosive erosion of the self. The cost is the silence you maintain when your intuition is screaming. The cost is the authenticity you trade for the safety of not being called ungrateful. The cost is the exhaustion of waking up every morning and putting on a mask of appreciation for a life that feels like it's being lived in a cage of someone else's design.
Carl Jung once spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. But he warned that when the mask begins to fit too tightly, the true self begins to wither in the dark. For the debt-burdened empath, the mask isn't just a choice, it's a survival requirement. You aren't wearing the mask because you want to be nice. You're wearing it because you're terrified of the psychological fallout if you take it off. Let's pause here, because I know how heavy this feels. Take a breath. The core fear driving this isn't just a fear of judgment. It's the fear of being seen as the villain in a story someone else is writing. You've been convinced that your boundaries are betrayals and your needs are burdening. So you've learned to bury your inner truth so deep that even you can't find it anymore. You've traded your sovereignty for a belonging that feels conditional. You are grieving the version of yourself that was allowed to say no without a 3-paragraph apology. You are grieving the simplicity of a world where kindness didn't come with an invoice attached. When these patterns aren't addressed, they don't just go away, they grow up with us. They become the blueprint for how we navigate our professional, romantic, and internal lives. I'll admit, seeing myself in some of these patterns was a bitter pill to swallow, but we can't heal what we refuse to witness. If you are being manipulated by hidden agenda kindness, you likely recognize these adult symptoms. First, the workplace overcorrection. You don't just do your job, you feel a compulsive need to overperform to repay the company for simply hiring you. You stay late, take on extra projects, and never ask for a raise because you feel like you're already in debt to their opportunity. Sound familiar? Then there is the golden handcuff relationship. You find yourself staying in a relationship that has no spark, or worse, is subtly draining, simply because your partner is so nice. You feel like a monster for wanting to leave someone who does everything for you, even if they use those deeds as a shield against any accountability. There is also the paragraph apology reflex. When you have to decline an invitation or set a minor boundary, your response is a wall of text. You are preemptively defending yourself against the accusation of being unkind because you've been trained to believe that a simple no is a moral failure. This leads to chronic decision paralysis. You struggle to make choices based on your own desires. Instead, you perform a complex strategic calculation of how your choice will be perceived by the person who does so much for you. You aren't making an active choice. You are practicing reactive avoidance. You may also experience a gift anxiety spike.
When someone offers you a genuine, no-strings-attached favor, your first instinct isn't gratitude, it's a spike of cortisol. Your brain immediately starts scanning for the hook. You've lost the ability to receive because you've been taught that every gift is a Trojan horse. Finally, there is impression management policing. You constantly monitor your own joy. You make yourself smaller or less successful around the manipulator so they can continue to feel like the helper or the provider. You've learned that your strength is a threat to their agenda. These aren't personality traits. They are coping strategies. You aren't weak or indecisive. You are a person who has been conditioned to prioritize the social mask over your inner truth to avoid the pain of weaponized guilt. The first step of the unlearning is simply witnessing the pattern without gaslighting yourself. It's looking at that glass-walled garden we discussed and realizing that the walls are only as strong as your belief that you owe the gardener your life. It's about moving from a state of indebtedness to a state of agency. It's realizing that kindness that requires you to abandon yourself isn't kindness at all. It's just a very polite form of theft. So, where do we go from here? How do we step out of a garden that was built specifically to keep us inside? The journey back to yourself isn't a loud revolution. It doesn't require a grand confrontation or a dramatic burning of bridges. Real healing is much quieter. It begins with the decision to stop being an accountant of your own worth. I'll be the first to admit, I am still practicing this. Even as I write these words, I feel that old familiar pull, the urge to over-explain, the reflexive need to apologize for taking up space. I'm a fellow traveler on this road, still learning that my no is a complete sentence. We aren't trying to fix a broken machine here. We are learning to be kind to a wounded heart that has been forced to carry far too much. The first practical step is what we might call the retirement of the inner bookkeeper. Through shadow work, we have to look at the part of us that enjoys the safety of being the indebted one. It's a strange comfort, isn't it, to always be the one who owes, because as long as you owe, you are needed. Healing requires us to reparent that inner child who learned that love was a transaction. You have to sit with that younger version of yourself, the one who felt they had to earn their place at the table, and tell them, you are allowed to just be. This leads us to a profound shift in perspective, intrinsic identity orientation. This is the radical belief that your true self exists entirely independent of external markers. Your value isn't a currency that fluctuates based on how much kindness you've received or how much gratitude you've performed. You are not a ledger of favors. You are the sky, and these manipulative gestures are just clouds passing through. They might temporarily obscure the sun, but they can never change the nature of the horizon. We must embrace the truth that meaning doesn't need a medium. The deepest connections in your life, the ones that are real, vivid, and permanent, don't require external symbols or proof to be valid. A person who truly loves you doesn't need to document their kindness. They don't need to remind you of the sacrifice they made. True depth is carried in the silence of the soul, not in the noisy exchange of social debts. As we move toward the end of our time tonight, I want you to do something for me. Unclench your jaw. Soften your shoulders. Take a long, slow exhale. You are allowed to let go of the weight. You are allowed to be ungrateful for a gift that was actually a cage. You are allowed to walk out of the garden and into the wild, uncurated forest of your own life. The poet Rumi once said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." In our case, those barriers were built by others and handed to us as kindness. It's time to take them down. You are not a debt to be paid. You are a life to be lived. And remember, true kindness is a mirror that shows you your beauty, not a leash that reminds you of your place.